Today's video, everyone, is about change again. But this time I wanted to talk about the type that you just can't make happen. Um, I think it's fair to say that when you're really truly stuck in a pattern and cycle, hearing people say these actionable steps that you can take is just annoying. Sometimes I don't know if you could hear me I forgot to put this on. Sometimes there aren't any actions that you can take. Sometimes what is really needed is actually more grief and more processing. So today we're going to talk about that and really just kind of get to the heart of that feeling of complete frozenness. I think that there's a fight or flight response sometimes, especially when you're being triggered, aggravated, and there's some anger that shows up, which is why anger and like feeling your feelings is actually super important and can really catalyze change and transformation. But what if you're not in fight or flight? What if you're in freeze mode? It's a dorsal vagal response to trauma, and it's something that really affects a lot of people. It is the most low functioning space to be in. Um, and I think it deserves a little stage time today in this talk. So, the one thing that I think is important to note here is that you don't stay in this state forever. You don't stay stuck forever, or you don't have to stay stuck forever. But it is a stage. It is a stage that a lot of people find themselves in, that I've found myself in. And what is required when you're in this stage is going to look a lot different than just taking action and asking yourself better questions. So, what to do when you're in this stage? Grieve. I would say grieve more, um, do some inner child work, and look at different things that you can release. So, first, let's talk about grieving. When you are stuck in a pattern that you really don't want to be in and you don't feel like taking any action, I think there is a big chance that you might have a strong attachment to where it is that you're at. And so taking time to actually just grieve the loss of what that's going to be like, grieve what it is that you're holding on to so tightly. Start the process of just being sad about letting go. And the more that you can just do that and don't ask questions about it, if you need to just cry, cry, like don't do any work, inner work, don't do any actionable steps, just let yourself be in your grief. This can be actually just really cathartic and really helpful to just let you come into more of that action phase, that sympathetic nervous system phase instead of the dorsal nervous system phase. So, grieving is one piece of this. You can even look up like the stages of grief that you might want to visit, and that might be helpful. But I wish someone had told me this earlier when I was, years ago, having a lot of trouble leaving a toxic relationship, is just start grieving, start being sad about, whatever it is that's coming up. Don't ask too many questions. You may not even have the answers to what you're really sad about, but try grieving. The second thing that I mentioned was inner child work, and we won't get too much into that because there's the word work at the end of it, and this isn't about doing any work, but I wanted to mention it because I think it's noteworthy here. Um, if you're stuck in a pattern and truly stuck, and there's a part of your inner child that is keeping you there, you wouldn't tell that inner child part of you to actually just like get the ball rolling and move on anyway. When you do inner child work, it focuses a lot on tending to and having compassion for and being gentle with that younger version of yourself that isn't trying to just like take action and make changes. Often, this inner child version of us is in that freeze state and stays in that freeze state until we actually do inner child work. So, if you think about something that you're stuck in, say it is a toxic relationship, asking yourself, like, what part of my inner child is being activated right now? What part of my inner child is frozen right now? And just sort of be with that tender part of you. Um, there's a lot that goes into inner child work. So, not to get too stuck in the weeds here, but I would say it's definitely worth thinking about how can I actually tend to the tender part of me that doesn't quite understand that they're stuck. Um, Picturing that younger version of yourself, maybe in that freeze mode, thinking there's no other options, um, and just being with that part of you, loving that part of you. And then finally, the last thing that I mentioned was releasing old stories or releasing a story or just story identifying. So oftentimes we're stuck in a pattern, we're stuck in a cycle because we're attached to a story. And this kind of echoes a little bit of that grieving piece of it here, but it is a little more um, it is a little more actionable in nature, I guess, because you're trying to identify something. So I would say, at the very least, if you're going to, enlist this step, just try not to do too much with it at first and simply ask yourself, what story is at play here? Am I playing the victim in a certain way that I believe I need to? What pattern am I seeing here as far as like a story? Is there something like I always find myself in toxic relationships, or I I'm never able to blank, or um sometimes it looks like, I have to do this, or I don't have any other options, or this is how it's always been done, or anything with like a definitive word in it is usually a good indicator of a story that you're attached to. So, like, always, never, every time, this is the only way, this is how it's, always been done. This is what my family thinks, and it's the only thing that they will accept. So, thinking of things that can potentially be limiting to you, that's a good place to look at in terms of identifying a story and just beginning to like release that a little bit. You don't have to recreate a story yet, but just being able to say, I'm just gonna like let that go for a little bit um, and see if that kind of helps you get into more of that actionable phase. So grief, doing more grieving, being with your inner child, and releasing stories, story release, or detaching at least from a story. I hope this is helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear. Hope you're having a great day.